So I'm going to tell Gigi's joke. Gigi was reading a book the other day on gravity, and he couldn't put it down. Here's another Gigi joke. They're going to have to change the name of the Payday candy bar because it's offending those who don't work. Right?
You're right.
I think I tell them as good as you, G. Or maybe you're getting the same reaction.
Well, I think we told it this morning already.
Oh, you told them already?
Yeah.
Gigi?
Then Friday night.
Well, I knew the Friday night one,
Then
but...
this morning again.
Oh, gosh.
We're all excited about
Well, now all of
Diane.
Facebook land knows. So, we're going to start our Hebrew series, and we'll dominantly be using the Passion Bible, but of course we'll have some stuff out of the New King James that, we have to go into the Old Testament and stuff. But I want to give the background of the book because I think it's very important to know the audience that you're speaking to and the context. Because a lot of times we take things that are in the Word and they're out of context and we apply them inaccurately. And it can lead to a lot of deception. Like, for example, where it talks about in Corinthians, we've discussed this for a while or a couple times, where women had to cover their hair and men couldn't have long hair. Well, the hair covering was so that the women of the church that were not prostitutes would quit giving a rough time those that had been prostitutes that had been converted. Because if I'm not mistaken, back then, prostitution was tied to occultism. It was tied to worship of idols. And if I'm not mistaken, the prostitutes would have shaven heads. So he's like, just cover them. And then the other scriptures of, a woman's not allowed to speak in church. Well, that was because, I think that was in Corinth too, wasn't it? Women that were priestesses were held in such high regard before they were born again. They were held in such high regard in that city as the mouthpiece of the gods, that when they were converted, they were trying to take over the church and the instruction. So Paul was like, for now, if you look in the original language, it was a temporary silence of women. And that's why he said, I do not permit a woman to teach a man or to have authority over a man. That word authority is not legitimate authority. It's a violent takeover. That's what that means. So, we take these things, like, for example, we've talked about this a little bit, but the revelation of the fact that, Paul was killed. He was crucified, stoned to death. And when he was stoned to death, he was in heaven. He saw things that he said are unlawful, or he cannot articulate the things that he saw. And he discusses the messenger of Satan that was sent to buffet him. I don't know how people twist the messenger of Satan to mean a lot of the things they say it means. The thorn in his side was not from God. The thorn in his side were Jews that were following him from city to city, persecuting him. So he asked the Lord to remove the thorn in his side 3 times. And Father, so my grace is sufficient for you. Okay, when I'm weak, he is strong. So many have taken that to mean that if we have thorns in our side, we have to keep putting up with them. We have to, just bear it. It's our cross to bear. And you'll always have persecution. But that was actually where he was at that point in his understanding of Scripture. The grace was given to him to endure. But then you see there was a shift in how he dealt with the thorns in the side, and that is in Acts 18 and 19, where he started a business and then they could no longer mess with him. So a lot of times we get revelation and grace for where we're at until we continue on in the revelation, and then how that problem is dealt with is totally different. Okay? So you can even take it to, like, let's say you sow financially. Well, a lot of people quit when they don't see results immediately. Well, you're sowing seed. There's seed time and harvest, right? Well, there's a greater reality, though, in the Bible where the one that harvests overtakes the sower. So now you've got where you're in a harvest, 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 harvest while you're also sowing, and it's an immediate turnaround. And so there's always principles, and then as you grow in revelation, you get into supernatural access to things that normally we wouldn't walk in. Does that make sense?
I'm wondering if part of that would be like, let's just say green beans. You don't keep sowing green beans for every harvest that you do, because it's they keep continually putting out. And so you do your green beans, and if you don't pick your green beans, they quit putting out. But you pick them, and then you go back, wait 3 or 4 or 5 days, and you're just continually harvesting. You're not having to resow every time.
Well, the picture that I'm presenting, though, would be, I mean, that's true, but it'd also be where in the supernatural realm, you pick and there's instantly one there. You know, it's...
But I'm getting that in my mind, where it's one of those where it doesn't have to be. It's just...
There's no time.
Right, there's no time.
Yeah. And, I mean, that's kind of a good point, too, where if you don't collect your harvest, there will be no harvest eventually, because you're contained in your harvest, there's always more seed. See, that's very important. And so if you're not sowing, you will stop harvesting, and if you're not harvesting, you'll stop having seed. So it's a cycle.
Well, and when you have a crop or something, and they talk about going to seed, that's exactly what it does. It thinks that's the only reason that a plant produces is for seed to, perpetuate itself. And when that dries up, the whole 9 yards, the cycle's complete, falls to the ground, comes up.
Right.
So.
And that could go to the Philippians where, he says, I'm not talking about you guys giving to me for my benefit. I'm talking about you guys giving so that it can go into your account. And we learned that account means logos, or to your word. And so your word, your decree, creates the container to hold your blessings. And here we've got, with this audience, Paul is dominantly speaking to Hebrews. They're Jewish believers. And some say Paul didn't write it. I am inclined to believe that he did, so I'm gonna refer to him as the author. Some say it was Barnabas, Apollos, or even Priscilla. But no one really knows for sure. The earliest church fathers taught that it was Paul. Okay? Eusebius refers to Clement of Alexandria, who confirmed without question that Paul wrote it, and they had contact with the early church fathers. You know what I mean? Like, they were maybe one generation removed from the apostles. And if you ever want to read like how it was back then, Eusebius's book is really insightful. I've got it. It's very interesting. Now, we know that it was written before the destruction of the temple in AD 70, probably around 50 to 64 AD. Whoever wrote it was in Italy. We know that much. Or Rome, that's where a lot of them were. Jewish Christians were the target audience. And at that time, we know that the majority of Christians were Jewish. They considered themselves part of Judaism as a different sect. It probably started as a Jewish sect, and over time it began to separate itself from the law. So just like David separated the tabernacle of David from the tabernacle of Moses, the same thing's happening. There's a prophetic parallel of what we're seeing here at this time. Now, the issue at the time that this letter was written is the Jewish believers expected the Lord to return very, very soon. And he didn't. And so the delay, along with them being persecuted, was causing them to wonder, okay, is this real? Maybe we should return back to Judaism. Maybe we should go back to what we know. Because that's what we always do. We always want, if we don't see instant results, we always think maybe we should go back to what we knew before. Because the brain itself perceives change as a threat. So then when you have actual threat, it can really be difficult to stay true to the course. So that's what was happening to them. And this letter addresses the overwhelming superiority of Christ And it warns them of the dangers of returning to the law, something that was passing away. So Jesus is the theme of the Hebrews. He is the language of God. And I love that phrase. When God speaks to us now, he speaks in the vocabulary of Jesus Christ. So in the Passion Notes, it says, he is greater than the law, the angels, the system of temple worship, and greater than any high priest or religious structure. Because our royal priest gave his sacred blood for us, we now have unrestricted access to the holiest place of all, with no veil and nothing hindering our intimacy with God. We can come with an unbelievable boldness to his mercy throne, where we encounter enough grace to empower us through every difficulty. We find our true life in his presence. So Christianity is not law. It's relationship. It's always present, always. And so whenever people start reducing Christianity to laws, they're outside of presence. We know that. We learned in Galatians you're actually an apostate from him. You have fallen away from him when you go into laws. Now, the Lord had me look up the name Hebrews, and I remember studying this years ago. Kent was probably about maybe 10 or 11 years old, and it literally means those who crossed over. And just like in our holiness series, there's a lot of foreshadowing. This is no different. So I want to begin by, okay, why the heck was it Hebrews, those that cross over? What was going on? So here we have, the first scripture is Genesis 14, verse 13. This is a first place that the word Hebrew is used, okay? Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and brother of Aner, and they were allies with Abram. Okay, so the first place Hebrew is used. Now, at this point in his life, he had left Ur of the Chaldeans, an ancient name for Babylon, with his dad, remember? And they traveled all the way to a city called Haram or Haram, and it's the name of the son of his that had passed away. So, I've talked prophetically about what that can mean. Well, from there, Abram went off toward the land of Canaan. Now, the Bible says that he didn't know where he's going. I personally feel he had an idea, and that, he may not have known that was the final destination, but it appears he just started toward that destination because his dad, Terah, was going toward the land of Canaan. So, more than likely, he had a little bit of an inkling, but he wasn't quite sure. His nephew, Lot, went with him, and eventually their families got too big. They prospered so much, there wasn't enough room for them, and plus their servants started fighting each other. So Abram told Lot, okay, you look out over all the land, you pick what you want, which is fascinating because number one, it shows his humility and his generosity. Number two, it's audacious because they didn't quite own the land yet. He was only saying that based on the promise. And number two, it outlines his trust of the Father, because if he's going to inherit a land, then he knows that it's impossible for him not to get the land he's going to inherit. So he was, and when I mean audacious, he already saw the land as his, although he didn't own an inch of it. You see what I mean? He lived so conscious of the promise and God's faithfulness that what he saw was already his, even though God let him know, you will be an alien in this land. I will give it to your descendants 400-something years after they enter into Egypt, right? So that's how our language should be, where we possess what he has told us to the degree that it's already done. And then when people look around like, oh, well, where is it? Like, it reminds me of when I graduated and me and Mike saw a Chevelle, and I had no idea what a Chevelle was. And I'm like, oh, I like this car. And we took it for a test drive. And then told Dad, and Dad didn't like the price, but it was already mine. I already had it. So we went over to tell Gigi and Mommy's, I got a car. Oh, what is it? 1970 Chevelle 396 Super Sport. And he jumps up to go look at it outside. Well, I don't have it yet. but it's mine. And then Mike, using his awesome persuasive skills, told Dad, he got him down like $800, right? It was like $3,800, he got him down to $3. Dad said, let's go get it. Well, even though I knew it was mine, when Dad said, let's go get it, I was all, okay. I was all excited. Plus, he kind of felt guilty because he sold his GTO in a drunken binge, and that was supposed to be my car. But anyway, so, but it was mine. It was impossible to not be mine. You know what I mean? And like your air conditioner, we had a prayer of agreement. It was impossible. In fact, we probably need to have a prayer of agreement that I can get a SIG 365 XL because I've been waiting 2 months. So let's do that Friday. But anyway, so when I hear people talking in future tense or turn around after I've prayed for them and still talk in future tense and act as if they're in the reality they were before we prayed, then I know they don't have faith. Now, sometimes you can have already prayed, it's done. He doesn't need your faith after. That happened with my foot when it was healed of being broken. So your language should reflect your trust, and your language should reflect that you are sold out to the promise. Jesus is the language of God. He is the promise of God. So we should speak Jesus. And I can guarantee you, He would never put something into the future that He already possessed. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Are you guys here? Okay. So I make, y'all are either concentrating or we need more coffee. Okay. Now, so we've got this situation where He's like, okay, you go out and you look for what you want. And He chose Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, He chose it by what He saw. And then Abram, he gets the rest of the land. So, we know the story of how he walked it. Okay, now, at this time where he is called a Hebrew, there was a war that had broken out between kings. And one of them was the king of Sodom, and one of them was the king of Gomorrah. In the midst of the fighting, Lot gets kidnapped, and his family gets captured. And someone escaped from the battle, and they told Abram the Hebrew. And of course, we know he rescued him, and then he had his infamous encounter with Melchizedek. Okay, so the name Hebrew, like I said, means those who cross over, and it came to represent an ethnicity of people. So Hebrew can be traced back to Eber, and he was of the lineage of Shem, the first to call on the name of the Lord. See, so their faith set them apart, but they also became an ethnicity. Well, when the Lord came and He talks about generations, if you look it up in the original language, it can also mean a race. So with the Lord, Abraham is our father, the father of faith, right? We're people of the faith, and we're also a new race in Jesus Christ. We actually have His blood in ours. So just like Abram was of faith in a new race, we also are of faith in a new race. Okay? So, again though, why are they still called Hebrews? Now, Eber is in the root word of the word Hebrew. But why? Well, the name Hebrew is particularly tied to crossing rivers. So when Terah, Abram's father, left Ur with his family, they had to cross the Euphrates. They made it to Haran, and of course they stayed there. When God told Abram to leave Haran, he had to cross the Euphrates again. I believe spiritually it refers to him leaving his past life and embracing the new, and foreshadowing the born-again experience. And we know, like in the end of the age, the Euphrates will dry up. And that will allow armies from the north, I think, to just come over en masse, which I've never really understood that because, the Euphrates doesn't need to dry up for armies to come across. So I'm not sure, how that's going to play a part, but anyway. Okay, now in John 3:5, Jesus answered and said, "Most assuredly I say to you, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God." So now we've got that whole water thing tied to our own experience. Okay, so from that point forward, you see the Hebrews crossing waters all the time.
The Red Sea.
Yeah. And, but before they could cross over, they had to have Passover. So before you can cross over, you got to have Passover. You've got to believe in Jesus Christ. He is the Lamb of God that was slain before the foundation of the world. And so let's look here in Exodus 14, 1 through 4. This is where, I was like, wait a minute, that's talking about Abraham. Let me get to Exodus, because I was in Genesis. Okay, so Exodus 14, 1 through 4. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, which Moses came out of a river, right?
Yep.
Speak to the children of Israel that they turn and camp before Phi, Beta, Alpha, I don't know what that is there, between Migdal and the sea, opposite Baal Zephon. You shall camp before it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say to the children of Israel, they are bewildered, they're confused by the land, the wilderness has closed them in. Now this is a good example of where God's picking the fight. He's put a hook in Pharaoh's nose, and he's leading him to his own destruction. Then I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them, and I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And they did so. Okay, I don't have time to get into all the original language here, but this is another example of why it is so important to study the original meaning, where it says, I will harden his heart. Well, people will immediately be, well, that's not nice, that's not fair. Like a lot of people think that God, like we're puppets in his hand, and we're not. What was happening here is that Pharaoh's heart was already hard. Therefore, it made him subject to his own demise. You see what I mean? He had already hardened it. I mean, he had seen locusts, meteors, lice, the Nile River, which was considered a god, turned to blood. All his firstborn son taken throughout all the land. And then he's going to decide to go ahead and pursue these people. I mean, I don't know about you, but I would think that if I saw these incredible signs, I'd probably be like, maybe I shouldn't mess with them. Like you got the Philistines. They take the ark that they won fair and square in battle. They put it in the temple of Dagon, and it just took, 3 times? Then they broke out in hemorrhoids, and then they got, God keeps falling over and his hands are cut off, and then his head's cut off right before the ark. I mean, it's crazy. They're like, we probably need to get this out of here. Let's just go ahead and put it on a new ark so we don't offend their God, and we'll just send a cow to take it straight back to where it's supposed to be. They had enough smarts. You've got Assyria, the great city of Nineveh. Man, I can't talk. That here, a bleached albino prophet that smelled like fish comes into the town and says, hey, you guys need to repent or God's going to destroy you all. And I wish he would, under his breath. And they're like, oh, we'll repent. But here Pharaoh has such a hard heart because he considered himself a god. Now it's God against God, right? And so his heart was already hardened. God didn't harden his heart to reject him. He was already well on his way. So he had already made that decision. Therefore, God took advantage of his hardened heart and used it to destroy his kingdom, to bring them down. And if you look in history, after this event, now some people try to dismiss it, but it is clearly in the history of Egypt, they never recovered. They were never the nation they were before this incident. It's very interesting. So it wouldn't be justice for God to harden someone's heart for no reason. However, he will use someone with the heart already hardened to further his purposes. Pharaoh fell into his own trap. And that's the same thing with the Pharisees, where it says their ears would be deafened, their heart or dull, their heart wouldn't understand, their eyes wouldn't see. That wasn't because God didn't want them to. It's they already hardened their heart. So he took advantage of it, see. So I just want you guys to know that, because sometimes people look at scriptures like that and think that God is mean. Now in verses 19 through 20, then the angel of God, which is Jesus pre-incarnate, who went before the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud went from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. Thus it was a cloud and darkness to one but it gave light by night to the other, so that the one did not come near the other all that night. The glory of God to some is darkness. They have no grid for it. They can't understand it. Remember, the cross restores the glory. The cross is the power of God. But for the people of God, the cloud is light. Okay? So it gets between them and the Egyptian army. First,
And if you've got a really bright light, that's all you can see. You cannot advance to fight because it's like a spotlight shining in your face.
right.
So that, to me, is what that means. It's such a blinding light that it was darkness, basically. They couldn't see any better than if it was pitch black.
Well, and if you've stared into a blinding
Right.
light, you can't see.
Exactly.
You know, that's the same thing with Paul.
Yeah.
He was knocked off his horse by the presence, the voice, and the light, right? And it blinded him. It was such a bright light. Okay, so verse 21. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. So the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on the dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went after them in the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. Again, you know, I would probably just maybe second guess my decision to pursue. Now it came to pass in the morning watch that the Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud, and he troubled the army of the Egyptians. Now the word troubled means confused, but he basically started picking on them. He took off their chariot wheels. I'm sorry, that just cracks me up. And the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians and their chariots on the horsemen." And sure enough, that's what happened. It's kind of like, you know, in the history of this country. So I think it was the War of 1812. You know, we'd already defeated them and became a nation, but they weren't happy about it. So they come back in 1812 to try to pick a fight. Well, the Brits. Well, the problem is that during this time, a hurricane, a huge, well, let me backtrack. We may have provoked them a little bit because we crossed the borders over into Canada and burned down their capital. And so that might have been a provoking, I don't know. But anyway, and so they show up and they're fighting us in Washington, Washington, D.C., I believe, Pennsylvania, different places.
Niagara, like Fort Niagara and Ticonderoga, up in the Adirondacks.
Gigi,
Yeah.
are you speaking in tongues?
That, you know,
But wherever it was,
yeah.
a hurricane had broken out. More of the Brits got killed by lightning than guns. Tornadoes were breaking out everywhere. And finally they're like, you know what? God is obviously fighting for this country. We're out of here. So it went on for a little bit, but they saw God's hand. You can go to the World War II, where Nazi fighter pilots, like they would be fighting against our forces or England's forces, and they would poof, disappear. Or weird stuff would happen with their equipment, and they're like, there's something going on up here. And Reese Howell and their family, or their ministry were praying during that time. So God does have a history of jacking with people's military equipment, using natural forces.
And the same thing when Israel became a country in 48.
Six-Day War,
In the
yeah.
6-Day War, there was all kinds of miraculous things that happened in that time period.
Okay, so he troubles the army, takes off the chariot wheels, and then they cross over. Now, I want to read, I'm not going to turn there, 1 Corinthians 10, 1 through 2. This is what Paul said about the incident. "Moreover, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware that our fathers were under the cloud, all passed through the sea, all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea." So the baptism by the sea is baptism of water. The baptism of cloud is the glory, the Holy Spirit baptism. Okay? So it's all in, and they were what? 2 separate incidents. The cloud and the sea were not the same thing. So their crossing over was considered a baptism. Crossing a river symbolically stands for death to self, not deaths, although if you have to die many times, okay. And moving into the promised land. Like the Jordan River crossover by Joshua and the Israelites to take the promised land, which I've discussed many, many times. But let's look at this one verse, verse 16. That the waters which came down from upstream stood and rose in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zaratan. So the waters that went down into the sea of the Arabah, or the Salt Sea, or the Dead Sea today, failed and were cut off, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho. So obviously, this is clearly referring to the rolling back of sin, right? And even the fact where it says, and they failed and were cut off. So Jesus Christ cut off the power of sin in our lives. Sin fails. It does not have any hold, but so does death. So that's why the enemy is so mad, is because he's a failure. He'll always be a failure. So, Romans 6:4, therefore we were buried with him through baptism into death, that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. Now the word buried here refers to being buried with someone else. I had no idea. You're not just in your own grave. When I looked it up, I'm like, what? So you're buried with someone else. Now baptism means to dip. It has the idea of immersion. You know, it's not a sprinkle. You're immersed into the water. In fact, I was asked Wednesday, is there ever a reason to be baptized over? You know, water baptism, like some people keep doing it over and over. And I said, well, if there's people that keep getting water baptized all the time, they don't understand baptism. You know, you don't need to get water baptized, you know, every week. But for those that maybe were, you know, raised in the Catholic Church where I think you're sprinkled or it's poured on you, who else, are there other people that do that? Methodists do that?
There's also a reason to do it again is if you're baptized into the church.
Okay.
That's why I did it again.
Yeah.
Baptized.
So I told him, I said, you know, if you have not been immersed or if you do not understand baptism, absolutely. You know, I said some, maybe they were baptized as a kid, you know, and they want to be baptized as an adult because it means more to them, you know. So anyway, but you're buried with Jesus. That's what's amazing to me. You're not in the grave alone, okay? And that's why Protestants would use immersion typically. I didn't know Methodists just sprinkle. It's a representation of our death in Christ, but also, and I love this, a decree or act of loyalty to the one true God. And we've discussed that to a degree.